Okay, good Shabbos. So this week's parasha is, of course, Parashat Vayeshev. But it's also very interesting that this week, of course, begins the festival of Chanukkah, the festival of lights, the festival of dedication. And every year when these parashas fall on the festival dates, our rabbis always tell us we're supposed to find a connection between the two. So today I want to try and find a connection between Parashat Vayeshev and Chanukkah, which starts, of course, tomorrow night. Now, there's many connections, and over the years, we've discussed different connections between the two. Today, I want to bring to you one that I think is completely new, that you have probably never heard before in your life, because I've never heard it until this week, to do with Joseph's dreams. Did you know that Joseph dreamt about Chanukkah? All right, so you know the story of this parasha with Joseph dreams and how that makes his brothers angry at him because he's got that amazing Technicolor raincoat, right? How many dreams does Joseph have in this parasha? What makes you think that? What Bible are you reading? Let's read the text. Let's go to Genesis 37, verse 5 to 8, and read it like we were taught in primary school, with your finger right there, okay? And you follow your finger. Let's work out how many dreams Joseph actually dreamed. Okay, so first of all, it tells us about the amazing coat that he had, the colorful coat that he had, and then they get very angry at him because of this coat that he's wearing. Verse 5, it says, Joseph had a dream which he told his brothers. Okay, so there's the first dream. And that made them hate him all the more. So we've got one dream, right? Verse 6, he said to them, listen while I tell you about this dream of mine. This dream number 2, we were tying up bundles, and all those bundles bowed down to the other bundle, right? So it goes on and explains, listen while I tell you this dream of mine. We were tying up bundles of wheat in the field when suddenly my bundle got up by itself and stood upright. Then your bundles came, gathered around mine, prostrated themselves before it. His brothers retorted, yes, you will certainly be our king. You'll do a great job of bossing us around. And they hated him even more for his dreams, plural. That means there's already been at least 2 dreams up until this point, right? For what he said. Verse 9, he had another dream, dream number 3. And he told his brothers, this is the dream, of course, of the stars and the sun and the moon bowing down to him. So what we have here is actually 3 dreams at least that we see Joseph having. So there's an extra dream hidden for us in the Torah. Today we're going to try and figure out what is this extra dream and what is the purpose of it and why was this dream hidden from us? Why is it hidden in the Torah? So I had to do a bit of digging this week, and I came across an Italian rabbi known as the Bartanura, quite famous, quoting quite often, Vayeshev of Bartanura. And he actually goes and quotes for us from the Talmud exactly where we find what the dream was. Even Rashi quotes this part of the Talmud as well, a few weeks from now. So we're studying the story of Joseph, and a few weeks from now, their father Jacob passes away, right? And he has to ask Pharaoh if he can go with his brothers and go bury his father up in the cave of Machpelah. And after they've buried their father Yaakov, the brothers of Joseph start getting scared. They start thinking, oh, now that our father is gone, now Joseph's going to get payback. He's going to get revenge for what we did to him when we were young. We better make him make an oath to us that he won't kill us now that our father is out of the picture. So listen to this. This is a few weeks from now, Parashat Vayeshev, Genesis 56, right at the end of Genesis, verse 21. Did I say 56? I probably meant 50. Hey. 50, verse 21. This is after they bury their father. He has to go and comfort them. He has to tell them not to be afraid. Am I in the place of God, he says. You meant to do me harm, but God meant it for good, he says to them. Verse 21, so don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. In this way, he comforted them, speaking kindly to them. Okay, he comforted them, speaking kindly to them. What did he say that they found comfort in? So the Talmud actually records for us exactly what he said to them. He told them a little story with meaning. This is what he told them. All right, he comforted them. This is now from Tractate Megillah 16b. When Joseph saw that his brothers were still afraid, he again attempted to reassure them. It says he comforted them and he spoke upon their hearts. Literally talks about their hearts. Right? Your hearts. Your lave is your heart. Rabbi Benjamin Bar Yefes said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, this teaches us that he spoke to them words that are accepted by the heart, reassuring words. He said the following. Listen to this. He said, if 10 candles could not extinguish 1 candle, how can 1 candle then come and extinguish 10 candles. Meaning that if 10 brothers could not harm one brother himself, one candle certainly cannot harm the other 10. He himself, by himself, cannot harm the other 10 brothers. Right? Now, the Bartanura comes along and explains to us and says, this is not just a fancy parable that he told to his brother. This is, in fact, the first dream of our 3 dreams in this week's parasha. That he didn't explain to them at that point. He reminded them of this dream when he was there after the burial of his father. So this is the first dream that's hidden for us in the Torah. Okay, you guys learned something new today, right? Fantastic. Okay, so what does dream mean? It kind of explains to us, of course, just like all the other dreams, like the other bundles represent the brothers versus his bundle, like the other stars represent his brothers and his father and mother, and he's the other star. So too here, the 10 candles represent these 10 brothers. Of course, Benjamin wasn't born yet here. He wasn't with them to do the dirty deed of killing him and throwing him in a pit, right? It represents them versus him and his light against their different lights. That is what it's talking about here. Of course, we know the famous verse from Proverbs 2, chapter 20, verse 27 that says, the soul of man is the lamp of God. So he's saying the 10 of you, you 10 souls, you flickering lights, you guys, are trying to destroy my soul when you're throwing me into that pit. You're trying to destroy my light. But there's a problem when it comes to lights. Learn the lesson from Chanukkah. Can you kill light with more light? No. What do? Light just keeps on spreading. You only spread more light. When you bring a candle close to another candle, it only spreads more light. We learn this lesson from the Chanukkah Shamash, right? The middle one in the Chanukkah is called the Shamash. It's the servant one. And you use that one to light all the other lights. And then he quotes, well, my favorite verse in the entire Bible, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Now, what does that mean? I want to read to you guys something from Midrash here, talking about what's going on with all these things, all these evil plans that his brothers had brought upon him. Okay, so it says here in Midrash Rabbah 85, verse 1, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman opened his discourse on our passage with the following exposition from Jeremiah, the famous verse, I know the thoughts that I am thinking for you, the word of Hashem, thoughts of peace and not evil, to give you a future and a hope. So what's going on in this week's parasha? It tells us here. The tribes, Joseph's brothers, they were so preoccupied with selling Joseph. Joseph, he was preoccupied with his sackcloth and fasting, mourning of what happened to him. Reuben, his brother, was preoccupied with his sackcloth and fasting because he felt guilty about what they did to his brother. And similarly, Jacob, their father, was preoccupied with his sackcloth and fasting because he lost his son. And at that time, this week's parasha, Judah was also preoccupied, but he was preoccupied with selecting a wife. Who goes and looks for a wife while you're supposed to be mourning? And at this very time, it says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed is He was occupied with creating the light of the Messiah. While everyone was busy occupying themselves with all these evil deeds and worldly things, God used that time to create the light of Messiah. Within the darkness of all the things that they were doing, selling their brother, feeling guilty, mourning, within that darkness, God was busy with the light of Messiah. This is the light of Mashiach. Now, our sages tell us, when it comes to Chanukkah and lighting our Chanukkah, right, for all 8 nights, when you're looking at the Chanukkah, the most important thing is to be looking at the light. But the light of the Chanukkah, is it as strong as the lights that come here from our LEDs? No. So what are you supposed to be thinking of, meditating on when you look at the lights of the Chanukkah each year? They tell us that the light of the Chanukkah is not meant to be a light source, like the way that we experience light, like the sun that gives us light, or like the light bulbs that give us light. What we're supposed to be looking for is that light of the Mashiach that God was busy with, while all the others were preoccupied with their sins. That is where our eyes should be. And only the righteous can see the light of Mashiach in the 8-9 candles of the Chanukkah. Now, it's very interesting when it comes to Chanukkah, we actually have a halakha. A halakha that tells us you're not allowed to use the lights, the candles on a Chanukkah for any purpose. So if it's load shedding and you have to light the Chanukkah, you can't say, oh, we'll just light the Chanukkah and walk around the house with the Chanukkah. You're not allowed to use the Chanukkah for that purpose. You're not allowed to sit in the light of the Chanukkah candles and read a book using it for your light. Because it's meant for a sacrosanct reason. It's meant to be set apart for something else, right? What is it meant to be set apart for? To show us the spiritual light. Forget about the physical candlelight that we're lighting on Chanukkah. Our focus is supposed to be on the spiritual light, the light of the Mashiach. Not the flame, but the light that is concealed within the flame itself. Now, talking about concealed light, we've actually spoken about this quite a few times in the past. There's this famous idea in Judaism of the concealed light. We call it the organuz. The organuz means the hidden light. Now, remember in creation, when we go through the days of creation, on the first day, God separates between light and darkness. On the fourth day only does he create the sun. So where does this light come from that was there before the sun was created? Our midrashim, our sages, they all tell us that light was the light, the organuz, this concealed light, the hidden light, the light of the Messiah. And we had it in full measure during the Garden of Eden in the first 7 days. But when Adam and Eve sinned, God saw how man can misuse this divine light. So what did God do? He went and concealed it. He hid it away after a while after they sinned. Where did he hide it? There's a few different opinions in the Talmud. One says he hid it under his throne. Other one says he hid it in the soul of Mashiach. Other one says that he hid this concealed light in the very Torah for us. So that concealed light, that divine light, that organuz is hidden for us in this very Torah scroll. Our job is to find it. Now it's very interesting because the word light itself in Hebrew, or, guess how many times it appears in the Torah scroll? It appears exactly 36 times in the Sefer Torah. 36 times, right? Now, 36 is the number that we associate with the organuz, with the hidden light. Because when Adam and Eve were created, they were created, of course, on the 6th day. So tradition tells us exactly what happened each hour of that day of creation, right? And it tells us that man was alive for 12 hours before Shabbat started, which means this organuz, this concealed light, light of Mashiach, was shining on mankind for 12 hours, plus the next Sabbath. God let them stay there in the Garden of Eden for a Sabbath before he kicked them out and taught them how to make their own fire, right? That's the one tradition. So 12 hours plus 24 hours gives us exactly 36 hours that the light of Messiah shone upon mankind before we were exiled from the Garden of Eden. Very interesting. How do you say 36 in Hebrew? Which Hebrew letters do we use to write 36? 30 is Lamed, and 6 is Vav. So Lamed and Vav, what does that spell? Lev. Okay, it's not lev like your heart. That's with the vape, but still, the word lev is there. And we've got this other tradition that says that in every single generation there are 36 tzaddikim, 36 righteous people in our generation, for whose sake the world is not destroyed. So our job is to find these 36 righteous people among us and hold on to their tzitzit, so that our world will not stop spinning and get destroyed. Now, that 36 is also a representation of that light, or the light of the Mashiach. And Yeshua, when he was here, he was carrying that in its fullness. Now, we're in the month of Kislev, right? The month of Kislev is the month of Chanukkah. So many of our sages point out for us that if you look at the name Kislev, and you break up the name Kislev in two, what is a kiss or a kos? It's like a cup or a Tupperware bucket. Something you conceal things in and cover things in, right? So you got kiss, you got your concealment, and lev. Kislev is spelled with a lamed and a vav. 36. It's the concealed 36. If we're looking for the light of Mashiach and where it's concealed, this is the month where we are supposed to be looking for it, in the month of Kislev. And then comes along another commentator, the Rokiach, and he points out for us, when we light the Chanukkah menorah each day for 8 days, adding one light every night, how many candles do we use at the end of Chanukkah? Exactly 36. If you don't count the shamash, which isn't supposed to be part of it, right? Exactly 36 candles that we light during the 8 days of Chanukkah. Amazing. Right? So we see the light of Mashiach in the Chanukkah candles itself. Now, there's another unique halakha when it comes to Chanukkah and how we celebrate Chanukkah. Because when it comes to performing mitzvot, performing commandments, in order to say a blessing before performing a commandment, you actually have to do the commandment, right? So you can't say the blessing for sitting in a sukkah if you're not literally sitting in a sukkah. You have to sit in the thing, right? You can't say the blessing for putting on your tefillin unless you actually put the tefillin on. If you walk into a shul and you see a guy put on tefillin, you don't say the blessing. He says the blessing because he's doing it. The same with all the other commandments. Shabbat, you only say the blessing if you're actually doing Shabbat, right? Otherwise, what we call it we call it taking God's name in vain, saying a blessing in vain, because you've sanctified God's name and then you haven't carried through with an actual action. But when it comes to Chanukkah, it's the only mitzvah that is different. On Chanukkah, if you walk past someone lighting a menorah and you see the menorah, you're allowed to say the blessing. Because the focus of Chanukkah is to see the light. And if you see the light, you've performed the mitzvah of Chanukkah. That's why we have these public menorah lightings all over the world. Every synagogue is doing that so that they can show the light to everyone, so that they can fulfill more mitzvot. That is the core mitzvah of Chanukkah, is to see the light. It's a rabbinic mitzvah, by the way. It's not a Torah mitzvah. They're very clear that this is a rabbinic mitzvah. But think about that. Because what are we supposed to be thinking of when we see the light of the Chanukkah? The light of Mashiach. The hidden, concealed light of Mashiach. So it's our Chanukkah in the menorah. That's amazing. So in this week's parasha, we found the hidden light, right, in the dream of Joseph, in his Chanukkah dream, with those 10 candles trying to put out the one candle, but they can't put them out, right? What is the meaning of this dream that we have now discovered? To find out the meaning of the light of Mashiach in the dream, maybe we should go and hear from the words of Mashiach himself. Because of course we know that Yeshua did celebrate Chanukkah in the Gospels, right? John chapter 10, we find Yeshua going up to Jerusalem to celebrate Chanukkah. I like to believe it's his birthday party. That's why he went to Jerusalem. He was born on this holy night. But there are different traditions, of course. Okay, so John's Gospel, before he gets into Chanukkah, it's very interesting. When you study John's Gospel, it's almost as if John wrote the Gospel for us to study at different intervals of the Jewish calendar. He's got sections specifically put together for festivals. He's got sections specifically put together for parashas, as if he was supposed to, as if he was planning that we would study these on specific weekdays, specific readings, and he went and joined all the stories of Yeshua together in these clumps. It's amazing. So John chapter 10, it starts off quite interestingly, talking about parables of sheep and shepherds. How you're supposed to be shepherding, and Yeshua calling himself a shepherd, right? He starts off in John chapter 10, Yeshua says, you will enter the sheep pen through the door. Don't come through the side or through the wall or somewhere else, because you'll be like a thief and we'll shoot you. We'll phone ADT. Rather come through the door of the sheep pen. Then he says to the people who's listening to him, he says, I have one flock and there is one shepherd. Right? It sounds very much like the dream of Joseph, right? 10 candles, what does 10 represent? It's a minion. It's your flock. And there's one that's supposed to be in charge of them. Just like the Chanukkah, we have that one in charge of all these other lights. The Shamash is the servant to all of them. Then Yeshua says to them, I am the good shepherd. It's that parable where he talks about saying, I am the good shepherd because I lay down my life for my sheep. Like that Shamash candle, I give up of my own for my sheep. I enlighten all my sheep as well. Okay, so in this week's parasha, let's connect John chapter 10 with this week's parasha. Where was Joseph's brothers when his father sent him to go find them? What were they supposed to be doing? They were supposed to be shepherding the sheep, right? Take them out to go and graze. Take them out to pasture was what their job was. So he sent them out. He sent his little boy Joseph to go find his brothers. They were supposed to be shepherding in Shechem, right? Shechem. Why were they supposed to be shepherding in Shechem? What did we learn about Shechem in last week's parasha? Simon and Levi went in there and said, well, how about you guys come join us? All of you get circumcised? And they said, sure, good deal. And 3 days after their circumcision, when they're sitting there in recovery, Simon and Levi come and kill all the men in Shechem. It's an entire city with no men left. So their father Jacob, who obviously felt guilty about this, said to them, you've brought guilt upon me, sends them back to Shechem and says, go and shepherd in Shechem. Not just the flocks, but the poor widows and children you guys left behind. Take responsibility. Be a good shepherd unto all those sheep. But when Joseph gets there, they're nowhere to be seen. Some random guy pitches up there, and Joseph says to him, hey, have you seen my brothers? He's like, yeah, those shepherd guys, yeah. They went to a place called Dothan. So they were horrible shepherds of the sheep, the 10 brothers, right? They didn't even look after the poor sheep they were supposed to be looking after. Anyway, he goes off and he finds his way to his brothers in Dothan, and he finds them. And what do they do when they see him? They plot to kill him. Once again, talking about bad shepherds. Not only do they end up killing him, one of the sheep of their father's flock, but they also go and literally kill a goat. So they can use the blood of the goat to dip his coat in it and send it back to their father. These guys are like the epitome of bad shepherds. This is what it looked like. Okay, so now let's read John chapter 10, the story of Chanukkah, with that in mind. John chapter 10, verse 22 starts in Jerusalem with Chanukkah. It says, then came Chanukkah in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Yeshua was walking around inside the temple area in Solomon's colonnade. because Chabad put up a giant menorah. Verse 24. So the Judeans surrounded him and said to him, how much longer are you going to keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us publicly. Don't conceal it anymore. Don't be a hidden light, they're saying. We want to see it in front of our eyes. Yeshua answered them, saying, I have already told you, and you don't trust me. The works I do in my Father's name testify on my behalf. But the reason you don't trust is that you are not included among my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I recognize them, and they follow me. And I give them eternal life. They will absolutely never be destroyed, and no one will snatch them from my hands. You can't destroy life with light. You won't snatch them from my hands. My Father who gave them to me is greater than all, and no one can snatch them from the Father's hands. I and the Father are one. So once again, the Judeans picked up rocks, stones, in order to stone him. But Yeshua answered them, you have seen me do many good deeds that reflect the Father's power. For which one of these deeds are you trying to stone me this time? But the Judeans replied, we are not stoning you for any good deed, but for blasphemy, because you who are only a man are making yourself out to be God, to be Elohim. So just like the bad shepherds in this week's parasha trying to kill their own brother, same thing's happening with Yeshua, right? Yeshua answered them, isn't it written in your Torah, this is a quote from Psalms, I have said, you people are Elohim, people are gods. If he called Elohim the people to whom the word of Elohim was addressed, the Tanakh cannot be broken, then are you telling the one whom the Father set apart as holy and sent into the world that you are committing blasphemy? Just because I said, I am a son of Elohim. Why does Yeshua decide to bring this up? If there's guys that are waiting any moment to stone someone who says something wrong, would you go out there and say, hey, I'm God? Give them the fuel to stone you for blasphemy. Why does Yeshua bring this up? What time of year was this? Chanukkah. What do we know about Chanukkah? Who was the Greek king in charge of us at that time, the Seleucid king? Antiochus. And what's his second name? Epiphanes. He puts the fun in Epiphanes. What does the name Epiphanes mean? God incarnate. Epiphanes believed he himself was God. This is the story of Chanukkah. He's the one who defiled our temple. So Yeshua seems to be tugging on some strings here, trying to get these guys to wake up. He's saying to them, wake up and smell the roses. I'm trying to get you worked up so you can see something deeper here. Remember, they used to call him, the sages used to call him Epimanes, maniac, instead of Epiphanes. He was God with us. Yeshua says, if I am not, this is verse 37, if I am not doing deeds that reflect my Father's power, then don't trust me. Then I can be like an Epiphanes. But if I am, then even if you don't trust me, at least trust the deeds so that you may understand once and for all that the Father is united with me and I am united with the Father. One more time, they tried to arrest him, but he slipped out of their hands. Amazing connection to Chanukkah. Okay, so Yeshua says to them basically, if you can't see the Messiah at face value, then look at least at my deeds. Look deeper into that Chanukkah light, not just the surface level of the light like flickering in front of you, but look deeper and try and see that organus, the concealed light, the light of Mashiach, which is shining through my deeds. That's what he's trying to get across to these guys. In this week's parasha, Joseph's brothers try to kill him. And then they get scared that Joseph will take revenge against them. So he has to tell them, remind them about the dream of the 10 lights against the one light. He actually ends up comforting them for telling them this, right? In John chapter 10, these guys try the same thing. They try to stone him. They try to stone the good shepherd. But Yeshua's light cannot be extinguished. He's telling to them the same message as what Joseph tells to his brothers. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And even when they eventually did put Yeshua to death, through his resurrection, his light increased exponentially to the point where now the light of Mashiach is shining to every corner, every nation on this earth. While everyone is occupied with their evil thoughts and their evil deeds, while these guys wanted to stone Yeshua, what was God occupied with? spreading the light of the Messiah. So that's our lesson from this week's parasha, and that's our lesson from the hidden dream of Joseph in this week's parasha. That when we light the Chanukkah these 8 days, what should we be looking for? Looking deeper and searching for the hidden light of the Mashiach. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.